Stories are an important part of human history and culture, and have been since at least the 1990s, maybe even longer. Often the oldest pieces of literature we have from any given culture are the stories, the Homeric epics and Gilgamesh and fairy tales and oral histories that are handed down generation to generation. It seems that if you want something to be remembered, to be handed down, that you actually couch that in a story. I'm sure that there are many theories about why this is exactly, but I like to think that what you notice is when something appeals to humans in a sort of deeper way, it's because it reflects something about us. The animals that are cutest are the ones that look like human babies, and if you want to make something that will connect with people, you make it more human, you humanize it, you make it like us. The characters are what we connect with in films, the things we relate to, or rather maybe the things that were built to relate to us. It's kind of egocentric. This whole trope of portal fantasy, the normal English school child who gets transported to a magical realm, like in the C.S. Lewis Narnia series. Lewis obviously did this because that was his target audience, and he felt that he would better be able to connect with his audience if he made his characters more like them. And, it's probably easier to connect with Sarah in Labyrinth than it would be to connect with the puppets in The Dark Crystal. But even then, you'll see that they make those puppets as human as they can, or the ones that they want you to connect with. Stories, then, I think we connect with because they reflect how we sort of see our own lives, how our own lives look to us. We don't think of our lives in this sort of list of chronological events. If I asked you to tell me about what you did in the last week, you wouldn't give a list of chronological events. You'd pick out key, interesting or important events, and you'd kind of frame it around that. If I asked it about the last year, it'd be a different set of events. And if it was about the last 10 years, it would be a different set of events again. Experiencing life, though, is different. Experiencing life, at that moment, at any given moment, you don't know whether the thing that you're experiencing right then and there is going to be a part of the thing that you would tell as a story of your life later on or not. The narrative we find in books or films are like mimics of the way we find significance in our lives. They contrive these significant points of interest rather than generate them organically. So they can still connect with us because they, share the format that our memories do. But you'll notice that we can see the most uncanny thing in a film and still be underwhelmed, but to see something a fraction as exciting in real life can be far more exciting. We're aware that it's a contrived narrative. We're aware that it's happened that way just because someone decided it would, not because they kind of earned it. There's no sense in which an RPG is more real than a fantasy novel, but RPGs have access to a sort of more human, organic story generation process that other mediums just don't have access to. And it's made not by telling a story, but by living it through. It works out the same way it does in life. And I think this lends it a certain significance that you don't get otherwise. But because so many GMs are storytellers, they'll never see it happen this way, and they'd rather mimic the process than actually go through the process itself. And I think this process, which is antithetical to storytelling, is role-playing. Hi, I'm Matt. Welcome to the Tomb of Lime. A few times on this channel already, we've talked about how we should be focusing on what RPGs do that's unique to RPGs, or what RPGs do well. But there is an inverse way of looking at this, and that's to look at what other mediums do better than RPGs. And it's not the case that we necessarily have to avoid these completely, but you really want to be careful when you're designing for an RPG. You don't want to end up just making a worse version of something else, because if you do, then your players should probably just be doing that instead. It was noted by people that the effect that something like World of Warcraft may have had on the divisive 4th edition of Dungeons & Dragons. And it felt like a shame because instead of chasing what video games were giving to people, they probably should have doubled down on what video games couldn't give and that RPGs can. And I think one of the biggest things that RPGs can give you that video games cannot is an unparalleled sense of agency and freedom. In a video game, the agency you have is more like a walled garden of binary decision points. On the back of this choose your own adventure book, there's like a flow chart here. And a lot of GM advice sections will talk about laying out RPG stories and sessions kind of like this. But one of the biggest problems with that is, if you have a look at them, they're often way more simple than these things. So what exactly are you offering as a GM in an RPG? R.A. Montgomery's The Abominable Snowman boasts 28 possible endings. What you're really offering is like something like 20 different constructed narratives, one of which is the best one, right? And if you were going to write your story as a novel, you would have just picked that one, which means the rest are just 19 other worse stories, which your players can choose if they like. I mean, oof. Look, I was a storyteller like this, and for what it's worth, I reckon I was pretty good at it. What are your players then, if that's what you're doing? They're kind of just dice rollers, part of a binary choice algorithm, just listeners. There's no shortage of players like this that actually just want to be told a story, that kind of want to come along for the ride and make the small contributions they can. Now, I kind of consider this a disservice to the players, because the agency is an illusion. But there is a better way. What I think is a better way. Part of role-playing a character is making decisions for that character. For them to be real decisions, they need to have real consequences. And for them to be real consequences, they can't be a real consequence if it's something that has actually been written and decided before they made the decision. My best advice on how to look at this is to ask yourself, are the players contributing something that you as the GM couldn't have done yourself? If it's just picking branching pathways, could you not have done that? If they're not contributing something that is unique to them as a player, then what are they there for? This is another reason I don't like the war game angle, because if there is just like an optimal play mathematically, again, if you're the GM, you probably know the rules and the mechanics better than anyone. So what is the player contributing? You're just checking that they have read the rules just as well as you do. When you have these games when a new player comes in and they don't know the mechanics or their character as well, and they go to make a suboptimal play, and the other players lean over the character sheet and they say, oh no, look, if you had picked this power, you would have hit all 3 goblins at once and it would have done just as much damage. And they go, oh yeah, I choose that. Did they choose? Why are they there? If the players are there, they should be taking you places that you could never have gone by yourself. They should be contributing something as unique as they are, because their characters will be as unique as they are. It doesn't matter how extensive you make your branching pathways, okay? Because no matter how you look at it, it is a constructed narrative. If you do it this way, you have robbed your players of the kind of organic significance of generating that for themselves. The only way the players can make the story is by living it through roleplay, and then looking back and choosing the significant moments for themselves. If the players are just choosing a multiple choice pathway, they're not inhabiting characters in a living world, they're not role-playing. I mean, I guess they're playing a role in some regards, but not the capital R role-playing that I'm talking about when we're talking about something that's unique to the role-playing game. I mean, their role is just, part of a binary choice algorithm. They're not doing anything that can't be done in a video game, in a choose-your-own-adventure book, or in like these interactive movie experiences they have now. And chances are those mediums are probably doing it better. You might think that without your guidance that they won't be able to latch on to the most interesting hook in the kingdom, or progress through the hero's journey and have a redemptive character arc and reach a climax where they save the world, that it won't feel like the great narrative traditions that we love to see in our movies and in our books and so on. You're right, it won't feel like that. It's not meant to. Significance in life is discovered. It's only found in a retrospective view. So if you want to tell a story, this is how you should be doing it. If you've been a storyteller, then the shift to something that actually involves roleplay is going to be pretty big. It's going to be a pretty big conceptual shift. But the hardest part of it is just letting go of the old stuff, because once you actually get on board with this kind of method, it turns out that it's actually, in a lot of ways, it's a lot less work to run it. If it wasn't clear already, the first step is actually just not to write a story. You can write premise and you can write setting and you can write characters, but once the story starts, that's what you should have. You should have your world and you should have your characters, and that's it. If you focus on writing characters rather than plot, you might see that your character, with their motivations, will drive them down a path that looks like a traditional villain arc, let's say. But because you know who they are, rather than what they're going to do or meant to do, then if the players do interfere, you'll know exactly how that character will act, how they'll react. You might think that your players will kind of flounder in indecision or get bored waiting for the call to action. But just remember that the way we see the world is a reflection of ourselves. If your players see the sandbox as empty, it's probably because their characters are empty. The single best thing that you can do to foster this kind of roleplay is to get the players on board with what the goal of the game is. You don't want to invite them to come and be, a character in a screenplay, a player in a play. You want to invite them to come and be a person in a living world where all the characters, player characters or non-player characters, have goals and motivations and will seek to fulfill them and live to tell the tale. Or not, or die with honor, or whatever. If the characters are interesting, and if they live in interesting times, then you won't need to construct a classic plot in order to have an interesting story. You don't need to seek the story. You just need to live. You just need to roleplay. There's kind of like a underground counterculture of how to run games this way, the opposite of all the GM advice on how to tell good stories. But this video is getting long enough, I think. I plan on exploring more of how exactly to run this sort of emergent story and the emergent character arc in the future. In the meantime, though, ask away. Like, there's plenty of people around who have been doing it this way and have great advice to give you. And, I know that when I let go of the storyteller's grip that I had 100 questions, because suddenly the foundation that you were used to is gone. The structure that you had is gone. But don't worry, it is worth it, okay? Let go. I've said it before, I think RPGs have some absolutely amazing potential, and they have the potential to do things that are unique and just cannot be approached in other mediums. And this method of storytelling is one of those things. It seems at first like it might be unintuitive to that if you want to tell a good story, that you want to ignore trying to tell it. But just remember what it's like in life. Just remember how those things are actually generated organically as human beings. You'll see that RPGs can do it in a way that much better approximates real life than constructive narratives ever will. Until next time, my name's Matt. This has been The Tomb of Lime. Thanks for listening.